Hi, George, welcome. We just wanted to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Yes, my name is George Brown, and I'm the president of the Ontario Paralegal Association. I've been practicing as a paralegal for over 24 years, and I think it's safe to say I've seen everything and heard everything over 24 years, and I'm here today to be a part of this fantastic cast.
Great, thank you, George. And I will now turn it over to Rochelle. We are looking forward to hearing her opening address. Go ahead, Rochelle.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. And thank you, merci, for this warm introduction and for the chance to be able to be here with you today. I'd like to first acknowledge that I'm joining you this evening from Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, which is a traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Haudenosaunee Nations. I have the great privilege to live, work, and play on these traditional lands, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to do so. So I'd like to thank the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals and the OPA for inviting me to join you today and to be a part of such an important conversation. So when I think about representation in education, I think about three things: the lack of representation and the impact that this lack of representation has on individuals from historically excluded communities. The second thing I think about is the lack of representation and the impacts that this has on society as a whole. And the third thing that I think about is the opportunity of representation and how we have essentially stagnated our potential for growth and innovation as a result. So to illustrate these three things, I wanted to share three stories with you to kind of set the tone for Vidal and Marcus to have this amazing conversation with our moderators. So the first story I wanted to share is about a mentorship program for Black youth that I co-founded here in the Niagara region. So just to set some context, here in Niagara, it is rare for a school to acknowledge, much less do anything substantial for Black History Month. Very much it's a parent-led or student-led initiative. And so it's very rare to see that happen, or even the infusion of Black achievement, literature, and history into the curriculum. And the reasons are rooted in a lack of representation of teachers, their own ignorance regarding the Black experience in Canada, and quite frankly, there's a perception that there's no need, given that Black students are not a large demographic in any given school. As a result, we started a mentorship program for Black identifying youth to thrive, learn, and grow in their identity. And one of our excursions involved a guided trip to the Welland Canal Museum in St. Catharines and the Voices of Freedom Park here in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And speaking to the various sites of the rich Black history here in the Niagara region. And one aspect of this excursion spoke to the significant contribution of Black Canadians to the War of 1812, World War I and World War II, and detailed accounts of Richard Pierpoint and the No. 2 Black Battalion as Fort Mississauga, which they built, is right here in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And one young man in the group exclaimed that, and this was affirmed by all of the youth there, that he had no idea that we had contributed so much to this country, and that we too were a part of the War of 1812 and World War I. He had no clue of this deeply rooted history until that moment, had felt no connection to the classroom lessons regarding the War of 1812, War I or even the region itself. And his words were, "We belong here." And this is the impact that lack of representation has. It results in erasure in the classroom, erasure in the history books, and a feeling of a lack of belonging and being made to feel like you have not contributed greatly to this country. The second story that I wanted to share is from my first day teaching at Mohawk College. Prior to teaching at Mohawk, I had taught in a private career college along with running my practice. And on my first day, I walked into the classroom and right to the front to log on to the computer. And one student asked if I wanted to sit with him as I walked by. I thought, how sweet. I guess I look young to him. Go team melanin. And then as I kept walking and I was logging on, another student approached and asked if she could help me. And thinking her question was related to me taking a bit long to log on, I let her know that I was actually fine and not to worry. But then she went on to ask what I was doing there. I let her know that I was the professor for this class, and her words stick with me to this day. "You don't look like a professor." Now, mind you, I was wearing a suit, heels, a briefcase, and I was up at the front logging into the computer. All of these things would speak to the fact that I'm probably the one that's supposed to be running this classroom. But this created an opportunity to have some dialogue about what a professor would look like and should look like. And I recognized at the time that I was more than likely the only Black full-time faculty at Mohawk at that time at all, and for sure in the paralegal program. There are not very many examples that students would have seen in the past. We've all shared stories about seeing your very first Black teacher, sometimes not even through elementary or high school. And so while there weren't very many examples for these students, my presence in the classroom allowed for a depth of conversation that would not have existed if someone else were at the helm. I'm able to cover a wide array of topics that I'm not afraid to tackle, and I can speak to lived experience both as a practitioner and as a Black woman navigating this country. In fact, about 2 years ago, I had a student approach me after class outside of my classroom, and she said, "I don't know who you are, and I know that you don't know me, but I see you every day at the front of that class, and it means so much to me. There are no Black faculty in my program, and sometimes I feel ignored and excluded to the point where sometimes I'm unmotivated to come to class. But seeing you up there gives me courage to come to class, motivated to complete my program, and gives me hope, and I want to say thank you." And even just recalling it now makes me tearful. I just thought, my goodness, this poor young woman. And I gave her a hug and I poured into her at that moment. I affirmed her, I gave her words of affirmation, and I let her know that I saw her and I understood. And that even though she's not in my program and not my student, to come and see me at any time. This is the power of representation, even to those you don't know are watching. And the last story, but certainly not the least, is that of Monica. Monica is a young girl that I met at a citizenship ceremony in Hamilton during Black History Month 3 years ago. Monica was 10 years old and was there for her parents' citizenship ceremony. Her parents had immigrated here to Canada from Nigeria, and after the ceremony, Monica mustered up the courage to come up to me and tell me that I am her hero. I was humbled and deeply touched, like right in my heart. And in that moment and in our further exchange, I did my best to pour into Monica, because despite being born here in Canada, she had never had a teacher that looked like her, and certainly had never anticipated that the judge would look like her too, especially with my head wrapped in a gilet, which I tend to do at times. And for Monica, I embodied hope and fulfillment of her own aspirations. For Monica, seeing a judge with the same hue of skin in a gilet during Black History Month was everything, and it was for me too. It was affirmation and confirmation. And in addition to Monica, I've had children of all origins espouse wanting to be like me when they grow up, because they see themselves in me in so many ways. I have women approach and speak to how inspired they are hearing me share my story, what little I do in a ceremony, because for them, I embody what the future could look like as a wife and mother of 4. I have men approach beaming with pride and expressing this to me because they see their daughters and their wives and their loved ones' futures in me, a child of immigrants, just like their own kids. That is the power of intersectionality. And I share these stories with you in order for you to understand how important it is for historically excluded and purposefully marginalized folks to see themselves in their teachers, to see themselves in the curriculum, and to have their stories of excellence and perseverance told and celebrated. then children and adults alike will understand that we have all deeply contributed to this country that we call home. All children and adults alike should have the audacity to dream and see those dreams come to fruition. So I look forward to this conversation tonight, and I hope that it inspires you to enact transformational change within the organizations that you have influenced. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. Thank you very much for those stories. They're very inspiring. And I'm going to now invite April and George on camera and on mic to continue with the conversation. They'll be asking questions and facilitating our conversation tonight. So you can go ahead, April. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have to say, after the introductions and everything, I'm already feeling inspired, and I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're about to have. So I'll get right into it. I'll kick it right off with the first question, and I guess I will first direct it to Vidal. I mean, you can both answer, but just so we can, so nobody's waiting to decide who goes first. So do you believe the education system in Ontario is representative of the students it serves?
Thank you for the question, April. And let me start by saying thank you to Deborah for the invite. Thank you, Sasha, for the introduction. My name is Vidal Chavannes. I'm coming to you from Whitby, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. It's important to name our solidarity with Indigenous peoples right across Turtle Island. So the question, do I believe the education system in Ontario is representative of the students it serves? I think there's a few different considerations when we talk about representation, right? So we have demographics of the student body, for example, and depending on where you grow up, sure, it could be representative of the students that are served by the school. However, demographics of leadership, teachers, administrators, is not there. And to be totally frank, that's really anecdotal information. We don't have the data pertaining to teacher race and administrator race, which we should. We're far behind in the collection of race-based data and reporting on it in this country. But if you look at some of the studies in the US that exist, there is a correlation between teacher race and student achievement, between a student feeling like they're being treated fairly based on teacher race. These things are important, and they're grounded in research. So I would say no, we're not representative when it comes to the demographics of the leadership that currently runs the education system in the province, as well as the teachers that teach within it. And then, of course, you could be demographically representative, but those individuals, if they aren't doing anything with that representation, then are they really representing the community? I think there is an import to activity and of effectiveness. So regardless of your demographic identifier of the individual in charge, are you doing enough? Are you working to change the system so that it can serve the individuals that walk through the halls or move through the halls in whatever fashion they move through the halls? Are you doing enough? I'm certain that everybody on this call will know that some of the most articulate voices for white supremacy come out of mouths whose skin is as dark as the people on this panel. So I think it's important that we recognize that that representation is important demographically, but it's more important in terms of your effectiveness in your activity. And then lastly, I think, Rochelle talked about curriculum, right? The curriculum is certainly not representative. And, she mentioned the fact that individuals are not, their contributions to the country are not recognized through our curriculum. And certainly that is true. And then if you think about the fact that, only music from Europe is considered classical, and only literature and art from Europe is considered classical, as though there couldn't be classics from other cultures, I think, speaks to the lack of representation in the curriculum. And the fact that, my daughter who's in grade 11 or 12 is learning from the same textbooks that I learned from and the same books that I learned from, I think is problematic. If indeed the curriculum is to represent the students that it serves, there's probably some new things that we can pick up that can help students to learn the skills, and we don't always have to lean on the same books and the same work. So I guess the big answer is no, it's not representative.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on all of those points. Marcus, what do you think?
I definitely agree with Dr. Vidal. what he was saying. And I served as graduation coach for Black students within the TDSB for a short time. And we learned that 75 to 85% of the teachers and guidance counselors within TDSB are white. So my conversations with a lot of Black students, they were saying that they don't see themselves in the curriculum. They don't feel welcomed in those spaces. Their voice is not heard. And they just seem invisible depending on what class they're in. If it's a class with maybe two or three of them, then they kind of like join together and try to get through the class together. But if it's one Black student in a class, they pretty much are invisible. Other non-Black students don't want to work with them. So it's just, I would say, yeah, I believe that the educational system in Toronto is not representative of the students that it serves. And I feel like it starts with trying to encourage more black educators to be in that system. We need more Black educators. We need more educators of color so the students can see themselves. And I love that story that Dr. Rochelle shared, that it's a research that's been done that if a Black student sees at least have an experience with one Black teacher, that they will graduate high school and go on to college. So just imagine if we have, a larger representation of students of color in those leadership positions, what that can how that can affect not only the students' graduation rate, Black student graduation rate, but actually students actually going to post-secondary opportunities. So I definitely agree that it's not representative, and I think something needs to change.
Great. And, I agree that, and the point that you made about guidance counselors sort of brings me back to my time in high school and dealing with some interesting guidance counselors who actually tried to discourage me from pursuing higher education. So yeah. So I'll turn it over to George now to proceed with the next question. Have we lost George again? Maybe? Okay.
Yeah, I think we may have.
Okay. I will ask the next question then. And I guess you can switch now, Marcus. You can answer first. It's a two-part question. When did you have your first Black teacher or teacher of color? And if you didn't attend school in Canada, what about your children or other family members?
Well, I can't speak to, I don't have any children, and I don't really know what my family members' experience was really in education. So I could just speak, for me, I went to a school that was predominantly white my first 2 years because me and my mom moved. I'm originally from the south side of Chicago. So my mom moved us kind of like in a suburb that's only like 5 minutes outside of Chicago, actually. And so I went there, and predominantly the teachers were white. And so, I wasn't doing well in those spaces. And they had a parent teacher meeting with my mother, and they tried to tell my mother that I had a learning disability. And my mother was like, I'm not having that. So she transferred me to a school that was in the city of Chicago, and it was all Black faculty. And I thrived in that, in that space. It was predominantly all Black students, and then all of the teachers were Black. And just having that care, from the teachers, and having that insight of what universities they went to. They was really promoting like historically Black colleges and universities because a few of the teachers that went there. So it was just like that hands-on care, and just being able to see people that look like you in those leadership positions. And I would say, like, even when I got older, I used to go to this open mic spot at UIC, which is University of Illinois at Chicago. And that was the first time I saw Dr. David Stovall, who's actually from the south side of Chicago. And he's a professor. And he doesn't look like, to Rochelle's point, he don't look like a professor. He wears t-shirts, he has tattoos, he has locks. He does not look like a professor, but he is a tenured professor, and it blew my mind just to see somebody in that capacity. He would literally go in the classroom and sit next to a student and ask, like, do you know who the professor is? Do you know who the professor is? And then when class starts, he'll stand up and like, I'm the professor, I'm Dr. Stovall. So it's just like amazing just to see and interact with him and just to see him in that position. And that's what encouraged me to like go on my education. So that was my interaction with Black teachers and Black educators.
Might I just jump in?
Yeah.
Fair enough. I didn't know if I should wait.
Yeah.
So for me, I didn't have any Black teachers in elementary school or in high school. I actually, and I didn't put this in the bio, but I was a high school teacher for 10 years in Durham here in the Catholic system. And I was the only Black teacher. And then there was a couple of supplies that would come in. It was an interesting experience for sure. I think, thankfully for me, my mom and dad made sure that I had a bunch of Black teachers, through books and videos and, my own research. It wasn't something that I lacked, but I certainly didn't have it in school. And I do want to, just based on the last question, we had a little back and forth about guidance counselors, a tremendously important role in a school system. And even in my own research, so I wrapped up my doctorate in 2018. So the research would have been done like 2016, 2017. And I interviewed all Black first year undergraduate students. Those were the individuals that I interviewed. And every single one of them to a person indicated that high school personnel, guidance administrators, teachers were either demotivating or ineffectual in their decision to attend university. Not that university is the panacea, and these were the ones who made it. Like, these were the kids who actually were in university. So what of the students that didn't make it? Like, what was the impact of those individuals on them? It speaks to the importance of representation and specifically that sort of key role of a guidance counselor is supposed to provide you some direction. But yeah, for me, didn't really have much representation. I was in the Catholic system, and it was largely homogenous. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think for myself, I can echo sort of that experience. I was born and raised in Toronto, and I think I had my first Black professor at the university level. And yeah, and to be honest, it kind of it blew my mind, because I'm like, oh, we're here too, because it's just something that I'd never seen. So it was amazing to me, and I agree with everything that you've said. The guidance counselor issue is certainly an issue, and hopefully through organizations like this and programs like this, we can affect some change. Why is representation in the education system so important? I think you touched on this a bit before, but.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that we have to think about. First of all, we think about the roots of the education system here in North America. John Dewey, who's considered the architect of public education in North America, studied at the foot of a German philosopher named Hegel. And Hegel argued that education is the art of making man ethical. Right? Education is the art of making man ethical. But he also argued that Africa was no part of the historical world, that Blacks have no sense of personality, their spirit sleeps, remains sunk in itself, makes no advance, and thus parallels the compact, undifferentiated mass of the African continent. So at the same time that he was arguing for the liberatory possibilities of education, he was defending and rationalizing a system of chattel slavery by robbing African people of their humanity. We have to recognize that the public education system is rooted on a foundation of anti-Blackness and anti-Africanness. And why is that important in 2022? Because if we know that the root of a tree is bitter, then we shouldn't be surprised when we get bitter tasting fruit on the other end. So that's first part. We recognize that the root is bitter. Now, also, if we look at the history of the relationship between Black communities and education in Canada, it really sort of goes cyclically. So first, we're fighting for physical access, right? We want to just get space in the education system. We want to be able to take up space. That's the first. And then the second fight is largely around trying to gain control of the machinery of education. So that's hiring a representative faculty, making sure that the curriculum is representative. And then the third thing that always happens is we seek an independent alternative. The only thing we haven't seen in Canada yet is an independent sort of Black focused university or college. It hasn't happened at the post-secondary level. It certainly has in the United States. I think it's only a matter of time because the system, again, is rooted in anti-Blackness. Representation matters because we recognize that the system has been set up and designed so that we would fail, so that Black communities would fail. That's the way it was set up. When we have people in there that are trying to change it, then hopefully things will get better. So yes, representation matters, but system change matters a whole lot more because there's a whole bunch of people who work in education that are probably really good people. They're probably not racist, but they're participating in a system that is creating disproportionate and disparate outcomes based on race. Whether you are a good person or not, whether you believe yourself to be a very well-informed and lovely human being, you're participating in a system that is causing harm to communities. And if you're not actively pursuing an agenda to address that system, then you're actually part of the problem.
Yeah, and I was just piggyback off of that. Like I know George Day, Dr. George Day at OAZ, he talks about counter spaces, like the importance of having counter spaces for Black students. Like he says counter spaces exist outside of schools, but I think counter spaces can exist within schools. And I think students, I'm more students based. Like I try to tell students that you need to take the autonomy of your own education. Do not rely on the teacher. Do not rely on the guidance counselor. I know there's barriers, systemic barriers that they have to overcome, that they may need help with that. But I think students definitely need to take autonomy of their own education. And I think forming Black student alliances, Black student cohorts, things of that nature, parent-student coalitions, those things need to exist within those systems too, to help along with the fight as well. And I believe students have power, like that youth culture power cannot be ignored because I tell youth all the time, you have more power than you think you have. So don't let anybody despise you of your youth or the knowledge that you come into the classroom with or you come into the school with. And I think, the system, to speak to Dr. Vidal's point, the system pit our students against each other. University-bound students versus ununiversity-bound students. Like that's a part of the European colonial project is to divide and conquer. So I think our students need to start like building, cohorts together where they help educate each other. Each one teach one. You know what I'm saying? Like in the days of slavery, when one slave learn how to read, you teach another one how to read, and that one teach another one how to read, and so on and so on. So I just think students need to recognize the power that's in them and do what they can on their end and to try to change the system inside out and create those counter spaces for themselves. Yeah, that's what I think.
Well, those are some great points, and I love what Vidal said about the sort of, I guess, the gatekeepers of the whole system, being real agents for change instead of just being a face, taking real action to, make things happen. And also the point that Marcus made about, Black youth really taking responsibility for their own education. That's something that I personally believe as well, that you really have to be also an agent of your own change and create your own reality. So that's excellent. George.
So that's why, just to jump in, April, that's why representation is so important and can't just be about demographics, right? Because not only, there will be some people who actually manage to get into a position that just don't care, but there are some that actually care that are so isolated and so like in such a precarious situation that if they step out too far, they know they're going to get their hands slapped and or lose their job and or lose their income and not be able to look after their family. So representation has to be about more than just demographics. We have to take that pressure that we put on the one black face all the time to change the whole system and put it right where it should be. Those individuals who have the power, who are the gatekeepers, that use their representation to change the system. I just think that's really, really key.
And if I could piggyback off of that, I'm gonna be transparent. And me being in the position that I was in, the principal didn't like the way I was moving, and that's why my contract wasn't renewed. She didn't like the fact that I was doing home visits or I was building with the students, and students was coming into the space that they gave me like it was Union Station. Said because they felt like they were being heard, and the principal did not like the way I was moving. She informed my supervisor, and they didn't renew my contract based on the way I was moving. Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. Because I mean, as a teacher, as an educator, you are the resource giver, so things like that should be welcomed. I see Rochelle, you've unmuted yourself.
I just wanted to add that yes. So it can't be about demographics per se, because as I live in rural Canada, right? I live in rural Ontario. These kids end up working in Toronto. These kids end up being, supervisors, bosses, vice presidents, whatever. And if they don't learn about the Black experience, despite the fact that there may not be a lot of Black people here, then they too will end up being the same people that perpetuate the same systems that we're trying to dismantle. And so it needs to be across the board, regardless of who's at the helm of the classroom, because of the fact that, I mean, you obviously want that representation in the classroom. The curriculum also needs to be transformationally changed so that we can actually create positive change regardless, right? Like it doesn't matter that there's only one Black student, and so therefore we don't need one Black teacher. No, we need that representation in order to ensure that Black stories are being told, that people have empathy and understanding of the Black experience that then ends up boding us all well in the long run. And then the other thing I just wanted to add too is in relation to student-led initiatives. So just anecdotally, when I was in high school, we tried to start a Black Student Alliance, and there was opposition. We couldn't find a teacher that would support us. And there was one nun who wasn't kind of at the beck and call of the principal, who said, I don't really care what they do. You guys can come and meet in my office. And so we did. And it took us a year, and we were finally recognized by the school. And the reason I share that story is because now my daughter is trying to do the same thing at her school and is facing some of the same opposition. There seems to be concern about when Black students congregate, when Black students get together, and what that does, and the power of us harnessing our togetherness, right? And so despite the fact that I was in high school way back in the early 90s, it doesn't matter. We're now, my daughter's experiencing the same thing. The difference is that there are a few allies in her school. And in addition to that, she has a mama who's been through it and a dad who's been through that, who can then also give her the guidance she needs to kind of circumvent the system.
Yeah. And can I say one more thing? I'm sorry. And to Dr. Rochelle's point, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I feel like the reimagination of curriculum and pedagogy, like how teachers approach teaching, that need to change too, because it's this hierarchical structure that the teacher is the gatekeeper to knowledge. You know what I'm saying? So they come into the classroom with this assumption that our students don't know anything. We start from scratch. And they don't create space where students can talk. So I feel like there needs to be, my students used to come to my office because I allowed them space to talk. I would just listen. You know what I mean? I would ask guiding questions, and they would just run off because they don't have that space in the classroom. And so I feel like reciprocal teaching methods, teachers need to learn reciprocal teaching methods instead of the banking method that Paulo Freire talks about, where you just give the kids a bunch of information and then you give them a test to see if they retain that information. We don't learn like that. No student learn like that. We learn through conversation, back and forth, questioning, reflecting. But the way the system is set up, it doesn't allow that space for students, especially Black students, to engage in their education in that way. And I definitely think the reimagination. I want to say the famous Canadian academic, I love her, but I don't want to say her name because I don't want her to be targeted. But I heard her in a talk, and she said, if our students continue to be in an oppressive learning space, then we need to leave that learning space, let that system collapse, and build on top of the rubble. of that collapsed system. So I definitely think education needs to be reimagined. It needs to be deconstructed, reconstructed, reconfigured, everything. You know, especially here in the Canadian context and even in America. It's the same. It's, you know, it's the same. And I think that's why that cross-cultural, cross-border conversation needs to happen too as well, where a student in Detroit like, oh, y'all, how y'all handling this situation? And the student in Toronto could be like, well, we doing this. Oh, really? So they informing each other. You know what I mean? So I'm sorry. I just had to say that. Thank you, Doctor. I really appreciate that. That's really good. Thank you. Sorry.
And see, just the response to that question alone, it really emphasizes the need for true representation within the education system in Ontario and in Canada and, well, everywhere, really. Okay, so are you with us, George?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you.
Discussion. Yeah, I'm truly enjoying this discussion. I remember kind of my light bulb moment when I was growing up. My parents and whoever was in charge would always threaten to knock us to Timbuktu, and we just thought that that was the weirdest place in the world. And growing up and learning what Timbuktu was, I would really want to go. But you know, and one of the speakers talked about we're set up to fail, and it goes back to you know what the Europeans did when they went to Africa. They just wanted to wipe out any indication that we were a sophisticated people, and we were.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the next question for me to ask is, what negative impacts are attributed to lack of representations in the school system?
I think Marcus, I think you're first this time.
Okay. I mean, that's a long laundry list. I mean, we could start with the increase in suspensions and expulsions, school push out, drop out, speak to the school to prison pipeline, false labeling of students, and I'll take the lead from Dr. Rochelle. I remember being in the principal's office at the school I was working in as a Black graduation coach, a graduation coach for Black students, and she had a problem with me working with a student who was quote unquote not on the track to going to university. So she was asking me like, why are you working with this student? This student is hopeless. She's not gonna graduate. You know, all the long laundry list of why I should not be working with the student. And I basically told the principal, we kind of went toe to toe. The vice principal was in there. She felt uncomfortable and just gathered her stuff and walked. She was like, it's too hot in here for me. So she left, and me and the principal was going back and forth. And I was trying to get the principal to see, like, if we don't deal with this student on this side of education, we're going to have to deal with the student on the other side of education. So we need to, you know, do everything in our power to ensure that this student is going to graduate, or at least have some opportunity to go through a trade or do something. You know what I mean? We have to do, it's our responsibility. And she just wasn't hearing me. And so I just feel like the laundry list is long, like the ones I just mentioned, when it attributes to a lack of representation in the school system. Those are like some of the negative impacts that come to my mind right now. But I'm sure Dr. Vidal is going to go more into detail. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he said.
Well, I mean, you hit the big ones for sure. So I mean, in addition to the suspension and expulsion rates, right, which are disproportionate, in addition to the dropout push-out rates, which are disproportionate, you know, we have gone through a bunch of iterations of Black students being channeled into programming, like you mentioned. You were talking about even yourself, your experience, into programming that will limit their choices, even if they do graduate, right? And that is a hallmark of the system. You know, part of our interactions with systems and education is probably the most prominent. They approach their interactions with Black students from a deficit model. Like, you know, what are all the things that we have to do and twist and turn to help these kids who don't have anything and fill them up with knowledge, like you were mentioning, instead of recognizing that the system actually brings deficits to that relationship as well. And the system could be pulling the ground out from underneath them. And I was just thinking about a story, you know, based on your story. When I was a teacher, so this young man came into my classroom just kind of looking a little bit upset, and I was asking him what's going on. And he said he had just left the vice principal's office. And the vice principal told him that, because he was having some challenges, he wasn't doing well in school, he was having some trouble. And the vice principal, told him, you know what, you should probably just drop out and focus on your music, and then maybe come back when you can focus more on your school. And I mean, the anger that rose in my body at that moment. First of all, I told him, if I hear that you drop out of school, I'll be at your house every day and pull your ass to school. But then I went to the vice principal and I said, would you have given the same advice if Brittany Smith had walked in here, blonde hair, blue-eyed Brittany Smith, who was having trouble in school? Would you have told her to drop out? Like, I couldn't honestly believe it. And I am not talking about ancient history, man. Like, this is not a long time ago. I was a teacher from 98 to 2008. And, you know, you articulated the fact that you were kind of pushed out of the system. I chose to leave, but it was largely because I just couldn't deal with it anymore, man. Like, teaching the kids was great. All of the other stuff that surrounded it, being looked on as though you're some kind of enemy because the students identify with you, as though you're doing something wrong because the students identify with you and want to be in your classroom. It was too much, man. So I didn't even know what the question was, but the negative impacts of a lack of representation are plenty. They're plenty. They're documented. We know them. And in addition to all of the things that happen to students, when there's a lack of representation, it also impacts the people that work there. And both Marcus and I have talked about some of those experiences as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was something I wanted to say to that, but it slipped my mind. Oh man, that was good.
That's why I have my pen, man.
I know.
I feel like when I'm listening to all of you speak, this is like taking me down memory lane, you know, back to high school. What Rochelle said earlier about, you know, gang versus a group of friends. That was my experience in high school. The power of Black people and just the negative things that attracts. And, you know, it shouldn't be happening that way. And, you know, and just, I mean, you guys said it all. Like the list of negative impacts it goes on and on and on.
and I remember my point, like to what Dr. Vidal was saying. I remember Dr. Stovall saying, think back to the teachers who really cared. Those were the ones that was often in trouble with administration. And it was sure enough, when I thought back on the teachers that I had, those were the ones that was always the one who actually cared for the students, the one who was actually doing the work. They were often targeted and often either pushed out, or they was just like you, Dr. Vidal, I had enough. I need to do something else. So, and that's a shame. And that goes back to what you said about the system. That's a systemic issue that needs to change, you know. So I keep reiterating that, like, something has to give, because teachers that's doing the work are getting exhausted, and Black students are exhausted as well, you know. So, yeah.
Agreed. Before I move on to the next question, I just want to remind the participants that we will be addressing your questions at the end at about 7:15 when we're starting to wrap up. So don't worry, we'll get to you. Just hold tight. Okay, so I'll move on to the next question, which is what can or should we do to improve EDI in the education system? So EDI, sorry. Sorry, answer the question.
No, it's all good. So I think there are a couple things I'll say. I think I'm first this time.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple things I'll say. I think sometimes we use EDI like it's one thing, and it's three very different considerations, right? So let's start with diversity. So how can we improve diversity in the system? There are some decent examples of targeted recruitment, of encouraging Black students to get involved in education, of advertising roles in places where Black individuals are likely to find them. There are a whole bunch of different ways to improve that. And then, of course, we talked about diversity as well in the curriculum. And there's training. There's a whole bunch of folks at the university that Marcus and I work with. Professor Lopez. Like, there's just a ton of people working on ways to improve the diversity that exists in the curriculum. Not knowing it or not finding it now is just based on not looking for it, because there's a whole bunch. So that's diversity. But then equity requires the redress of historical injustice, right? So there's a couple of things that have to happen if you want to create an equitable system. First, you have to recognize and admit the deficits that the system brings to bear on the relationship with marginalized communities, particularly Black communities. Like, we just have to say it. And then we have to be deliberate and intentional about addressing those historical injustices. And that could mean very specific programming for Black students, like they did in TDSB with the graduation coaches and some of the other things that they're doing at TDSB as well. And I think TDSB has led the way in many respects, because they have collected and reported on race-based data. And everybody else will hide behind, oh, we just don't know the information. Well, collect it, number one, but because we've been talking about it for the last 100 years. And then inclusion is really about creating an organization where everybody feels like they were meant to be there in the first place. Everybody. We're talking about everybody now. We're not talking about historical injustices. We're just talking about everybody. You want to create an inclusive workplace, then you have to help people get past the biases that they have in their own brains and the ways that those lead to stereotyping and prejudice and discrimination and oppression. Those are some of the ways that we can address EDI in the system. I'll hand it over to Brother Marcus.
Yeah, I don't know what more I can add to that, because I definitely agree with what you said. But I would say, again, my work is, I focus on the students, like Black students. So it's a book called Youth Culture Power that's written by Jason Rawls and John Robinson. And they said that there needs to be care, care for students, like hiring teachers that actually care. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I know this may not never happen, but I really do believe that students should be on the hiring committees when they're hiring teachers, because the students are the ones who spend the most time with the teachers. So why not have students be a part of the hiring committee? I think students should be a part of, like, curriculum development, or at least be offered the opportunity to suggest some things to teachers. Two books that again, the Youth Culture Power book, they have an acronym for CARE. And so they talk about culture. So embracing youth culture. A lot of this system don't even embrace youth culture. the educational system don't even embrace the individual, the students that's even there. Create an affable learning environment, relationship building. Like, it seemed to be like this thing where the teachers can't build relationships with the students. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, why can't a teacher build a relationship with a student and, like, engage in conversations outside of, the curriculum? Like, how you doing? Just a simple, how you doing? What's going on with you? How's your family? Like, having those relationships and connections with the students' family. Because you're not just, in my opinion, you're not just teaching the student's mind. You're teaching the student holistically, the mind, the body, the spirit, everything. And I think development of a different type of teaching style, egalitarian, where it's speaking to equity, where it's equal footing. Like, instead of saying, well, as a teacher, I have all the knowledge. Why not build a learning community? Like, we go learn from each other, because it is reciprocal, whether teachers believe it or not. They learn from their students just like the students learn from them. So I really think that it needs to be more care. And there's another book that I had in my undergrad. I went to I was in the urban teacher program in my undergrad, and we read a book called Fires in the Bathroom. And it's basically written by students who give critiques on teachers and what teachers can do in order to improve improve their pedagogy and their methodology when it comes to teaching students. So I think students should have input into, I think teachers need to humble themselves first and foremost and try to listen to the heart of the student and teach the student in a way where they're not, dominating over the students, but creating that space where it's like, I can learn from you as well, So that's what I would add to what Dr. Vidal said. Like, I agree with everything he said, and so that's what I would add to that conversation, to that piece.
Can I just add really quickly as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That we also need to see these initiatives happening at the post-secondary level as well. As I shared the story about the young woman who felt like she just did not belong and felt no sense of motivation, these same themes will see themselves in the children that do make their way into post-secondary, both at the college and university level. We see that McMaster, for instance, they have a Black Student Success Center specifically for just Black students. Fundamentally important in order to, one, have safe space, but also resources, Black-led resources in order for Black students to thrive. We saw OCAD have a cluster hire of Black faculty where they hired 6 design professors. Those are all very important initiatives that need to be done at the post-secondary level as well, so that once you've somehow gotten out of high school successfully and you're now in the post-secondary realm, that you can still find success. And because really, we celebrate you getting in, but you also have to get out, right? You've got to graduate. And so it's really important that we see those initiatives at the post-secondary level as well.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback off of that, I like the mentoring model where we create this pipeline. If there's a pipeline to prison or pipeline to push out and dropouts, why don't we create our own pipeline where we, have mentors in place that'll walk a student from elementary to middle school to high school, right into post-secondary, into a master's, into a PhD. Like, why do students have to wait till they graduate secondary school to actually set foot on a campus? I believe elementary students should start taking courses at York University. Have, part of the day they're at their school, the other part of the day they at the university, where they could be like, yo, this is attainable. I'm here, like having classes there where they can see it. Like, you have to see where you're going. When you're running, you got a goal. So why not we give and I'm not, like Dr. Vidal said, like, university is not the end all be all. Like, you may get to that level and decide you don't want to go to university. You want to go a different route, but at least give them that opportunity to, like, look, this is what the space looked like. And, put them in tune with students if you in elementary school, put them in tune with students that's in middle school. And then same for middle school students, put them in tune with high school students that they could walk with them. Like, this is what I did dealing with this guidance counselor. You should do it like this. And the same with going into. So I definitely agree with what you said, Dr. Rochelle. Like, it needs to be those systems set in place too. But I would say even starting earlier, so that's, yeah. Sorry, I'm taking over the space. Sorry.
Important.
No, that's absolutely fine. It's encouraging to know that strides are being taken, but definitely there are definitely, as Marcus described and as all of you have described, there are things that can definitely be done to improve going forward in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'll move on to the next question. This is our last question of the discussion. Please share a little bit about the work you are doing to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion in the education system. Marcus, do you want to start with?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, currently right now I'm a hip hop community connector for the Hart House hip hop education team. A lot of people have misconceptions about hip hop. Hip hop is not just performative, but it's an intellectual, because even the very definition of hip hop, a lot of people don't know the definition of hip hop. Hip means to know, to become conscious and aware, and hop means to spring up and move into action. So the more you become conscious and the more you become aware, the more you spring into action to change things. So we're looking at, and the fifth element of hip hop is knowledge of self, or gaining knowledge. So we're looking at hip hop as a way to, you know, have students take autonomy of their own education, because hip hop and education, hip hop for me, speaking personally, hip hop filled the gaps for me. Like my teacher told me about Christopher Columbus. KRS-One is the one who told me Christopher Columbus was a thief. You know what I'm saying? So it gave me ammo to go back to school. Like, he wasn't no hero. He was this, that, and the third. So hip hop always was that intellectual piece for me. It's not the same today, but that's another rabbit hole, because I see a difference between hip hop. Like Busta Rhymes said it best: rap is business music, hip hop is cultural music. So rap is anything that goes against love, peace, unity, and having fun. That's rap music. Hip hop culture is about community. It's about building. It's about movement. So that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing outside of the system. Is, well, sometimes we get invited into schools and we able to engage in conversation. We have a program called Brothers in Ethnic Excellence at C.W. Jeffries, and we've had like some rich, insightful conversations with a group of young men that go to the high school. We talked about toxic masculinity. We talked about hypermasculinity. We talked about the history of hip hop, what hip hop was intended for. Hip hop was not intended to talk about killing one another on record and doing all of these things and misogynistic lyrics. That was not the intention of hip hop music. So we just trying to change their perspective on the things they listen to and begin to critically think about the things that they're listening to. Because I'm dating myself. I'm glad I was raised in the era that I was raised in. I came up on the KRS-Ones, Poor Righteous Teachers, the X-Clans, where they was telling me about myself, telling me to think more about my community than making a profit or becoming some star or seeking fame. It was all about community. And that's rap music, when one individual and a few of his homies elevate and get rich or whatever. That's rap music. Hip hop is about community rising and elevating together. So that's a little bit of the work that I'm doing. And I'm currently getting my PhD in critical hip hop pedagogy within Black Studies. So yeah, and looking at hip hop as a liberatory tool for Black students that may be learning in oppressive learning spaces. So that's just a little bit of the work that I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my answer will be not enough. But no, man. First of all, this is the first time I met you, Marcus, and just let me say, like, it is it's not often that we get a chance to say thank you to people who are putting in the work. So thank you for the work that you're putting in, because it's very, very important. And you might not know the difference that you're making for the young people who that you get to interact with. So as far as I'm concerned, right now I'm not in the system anymore, right? I have a job in a different system that requires a lot of advocacy, but I do advocate for, folks that contact me to help them navigate through the system when they're having challenges with their kids, like with their children. I do work on curriculum. I wrote a Black Studies course that was delivered at Durham College. I wrote a Black Studies course when I was a high school teacher as well, that was delivered in high school. And I think part of the challenge is you build it, and then if you leave, like, who else is teaching it, which is kind of the problem, but it's there. I do a lot of equity, diversity, and inclusion training for organizational leaders, both in education spaces and in other industries. I do a bit of writing. I was part of an organization called Malvern's Men Making a Difference. So it was a group of men in Malvern that just after the basketball program at the rec, kids would come over, we'd have food, and then we'd just talk and try to provide a different sort of voice, which was fantastic. And then all of us kind of moved out of Malvern. So now we have there's a Black men's group in Durham region, and our first project was to raise some money to buy books by Black and Indigenous authors and by and about Black and Indigenous communities for individuals who are currently incarcerated. So we're doing it in partnership with the Ministry of the Solicitor General, and we intend to send a volume of 100 books to each of the 25 institutions by the time the project is done. So, just trying little pieces here and there, man. But as much as I can, like, I'm going to connect with Marcus, and
Yes.
I'm going to connect again with Rochelle, who I know. And, like all of you have mentioned, really important for us to work together, because when we cross the river in a group, the crocodiles won't eat us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, Rochelle, did you want to?
Oh, did you? Okay, well,
I saw that your mic was off.
yeah. Well, I mean, so for me, I'm a very strong proponent about civic engagement and encouraging youth to become civically engaged and navigating our systems, because the systems are there. And until they're dismantled, you need to know how to navigate them and to be able to advocate. So that's where a lot of my focus has been. And the mentorship program that was started here in the Niagara region, I'm no longer a facilitator, but that curriculum remains. And it's currently in the Catholic and the public school board. In addition to that, as a citizenship judge, part of my role, in addition to hearings and citizenship ceremonies, is going into schools and speaking with young people about civic engagement and inclusion, and about how we can create communities where everyone feels like they belong. And so that's part of the work that I do in our communities. But additionally, sitting on various boards. I still do work, even though I'm no longer on the Niagara-on-the-Lake Public Library Board. I did that for 8 years, but now I'm a consultant for the libraries in the province, for them to create inclusive initiatives and for them to diversify collections and their programming. Because for me, I believe that libraries are a very fundamental component to communities being able to thrive. It's the one space that's free, that you can access information both on the internet and also in books. And so it's very important that libraries are doing the work necessary to ensure that people in their communities feel a sense of belonging, but also have the capacity to learn about others in a very meaningful way. And so that's just some of the things that I'm doing, in addition to also teaching. And so I have those brave conversations in class that, I'm not afraid to have those conversations. And luckily, I teach about things like human rights and immigration and things like that. And so I'm able to infuse some knowledge and also promote dialogue in order to, my hope is that I create like soldiers for the army of inclusion, right? Like that everybody comes out of there feeling like they have a responsibility to advocate and to, be effective advocates. So, yeah.
Nice.
I'm sort of in awe at just everything that the three of you are doing. And Vidal, you made a comment that you're not doing enough. I disagree. I believe you are absolutely doing enough. And I think the goal for all of us, I guess, is just to get any other gatekeepers to do enough as well. I believe that what you're doing is amazing. And, just from the stories that Rochelle told and the stories that Marcus and Vidal, you've all told about, things that you're doing. I don't know. I have to say that I'm just blown away by just, how much and a lot of these things. Even now, I didn't know about a lot of that stuff. And so to me, that's all I want to say, that you guys are awesome, and just continue doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in and say something real quick?
That is my main comment.
Can I say something real quick? Because
yeah.
I meant to say it earlier, especially in education in this country, Black women have been holding it down, have been really on the vanguard of change in the system. And that continues, change and leadership. And I just want to make sure that we shout out the Black women who are putting in the work in the system, because they certainly are.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. On the state side too, they hold it down. Yeah. So it's the same definitely. Yeah. Salute to all the Black women doing the work. Yes.
Sorry, Marcus. Can I just also say, for everyone that is currently on the call, like, if you feel that what we're doing is so amazing, which humbling, thank you. But honestly, do what you can in the realm that you have any type of influence over, and you're doing the work.
Sure.
If your influence right now is raising your babies and raising your children in order for them to be effective advocates and for them to be able to, defend other people and to be able to, be contributing members to the society, and that's what you have capacity to do right now, then you're doing a lot, mama. You know, if what you have the capacity to do right now is, you know, you're coaching a basketball team, but those young people that you're coaching, you're infusing and pouring into them, you're doing a lot. And I just want to be able to speak to that as well, because all of these things collectively will have significant impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So I've asked a number of questions. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the participants to ask questions of our panelists today. Let's see. And if you feel comfortable, I will give you the ability to come on camera, and I'll give you the ability to unmute yourself. And yeah, so let's start with the first person that I see is Elaine Page. Let me see if I can.
Oh, hi. I'm not coming on camera because I'm cooking for Passover and I'm a mess. Firstly, I want to thank you all. I had trouble signing in, but what an extraordinary group of people you are, and I have learned so much. So I wanted to say thank you. And I wanted to just share a quick story, and then I have a quick question. George and I have known each other for many years, and George will tell you that I'm Jewish. And I wanted to share a story that maybe you've never heard of. So during World War II, the Nazis would not allow the Jewish university professors to teach at the universities. And these were some of the greatest minds ever. Einstein was included in that. But they did let them leave, and they came to America, and the white universities would not let them teach because they were Jews. And so they ended up in the black universities. So you had all of these, and there's an amazing documentary about it. And so they forged community together. And of course, you know, the people that they taught went on to just be, you know, incredible, wonderful people and did amazing things. So it's kind of a neat story, and I didn't know if you knew about it, and I wanted to share it. My question is really, so I'm white, and I would like to know how to be a better ally.
Marcus, you're muted. I don't know if you want me to jump in first.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know if you've thank you for the question, first of all. I don't know if you've seen the book, Ibram X. Kendi's book. I can't remember the name of it now. However, in the book, he kind of throws down the gauntlets. How to Be an Anti-Racist, it's called. Mm-hmm. And yeah. And essentially, I mean, there are some challenges with the book, but essentially the message is you're either racist or anti-racist, right? There's no middle ground. And I think, you know, the way that you're a good ally is you are actively deliberate and intentional in your pursuit of anti-racism. And, you know, I think the days of, oh, I'm a good person, this has nothing to do with me, are over. If you're not actively pursuing an agenda of anti-racism, then you're part of the problem. That's the first thing I'll say. So being deliberate and intentional. And then I think making space for individuals that might be colleagues of yours and I don't know where you work, to be honest, but might be colleagues of yours is maybe letting them have the spotlight and the space to maneuver and just kind of stepping aside. That is a good way to be an ally. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Marcus, if you want to jump in as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the last point that you made is huge. If you have, like, you know, a platform where you have people that's, you know, that your voice is, you know, carry some weight, I would say relinquish that platform for someone who may not have that voice, who may have something to say from a marginalized community. I think that's definitely important. And I think asking permission to be an ally, because some people just say they want to be allies without even asking permission. They just like, I'm an ally. but they're not really like doing the work. So I agree with, and that's to, reinforce the first point that Vidal made. Like, it's no middle ground anymore. You're either on this side or that side. So I agree. I agree 100%. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
And I would just add that I think it's important to ask what that allyship should look like for the individuals that you would like to be able to, I don't know, make space for. We can't assume that you can't assume that what you want to do is what people need. It's really important to ask what people need. And sometimes people don't know what they need because no one's ever asked. And so facilitating that conversation and helping that conversation and then facilitating what those needs might be. Another thing that I wanted to just add as well is that sponsorship is really, really important. We talk a lot about mentorship being important, and it is. But sponsorship is really important, opening doors for other people and creating opportunities for other people. I could share many, many stories, but I won't. Sponsorship is really, really important. And I can't tell you how many times I've been questioned about my credentials in the classroom when no one else has ever been questioned, despite what my bio might say. And so I just think it's really, really important that sponsorship, if you have the capacity to open doors for others and create opportunities for others, that you do so.
Great. Thank you for your well thought out answers, and I will definitely take those away and put them in my toolbox, and very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Elaine.
Okay, thanks, Elaine, for your question. I'm going to move on now to Siobhan Pierre. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm not going to go on camera. It's just kind of chaos with all the children. But I wanted first to say thank you to the speakers. This evening's event was very inspiring, very informative, as well as to the OAPB for putting on the event. I have 2 questions. My first is to Marcus Singleton. Mr. Singleton, is it possible for you to repeat the names of the 2 books that you spoke about?
Yeah, definitely. The first book is Youth Culture Power. It's by Jason Rawls, who's a professor at Ohio State University, and I think they just created a hip hop ed program there that he oversees. And the other book was, what was the other book? Oh yeah, Fires in the Bathroom by Kathleen Butchum, I think, or Bachman. I'll find the name, but it's called Fires in the Bathroom.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, but her first name is Kathleen?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I'm
Perfect.
looking at it. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Chavannes, in regards to the your initiative with Durham Men and getting the books into the prison system, how can we contact you in regards to that?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. I don't know if I can, because I don't have access to the chat, but maybe I can have somebody send around the link. We partnered up. The last thing we want to do, we're just a group of guys. We didn't want to start a formal organization. So we partnered up with an organization called Blackstone Foundation Library that has been working to create sort of Black libraries per se in different spaces. And so they are a legitimate nonprofit that you can donate to and get a tax receipt, etc. What I can just suggest at the moment is if you just Google Blackstone Foundation Library and you go to their website, our group is called the Brotherhood, and you'll be able to click on the link and contribute that way. If that's what you meant, if you meant financial contribution, then yeah, absolutely. You can click on the link and contribute that way. If you want to contribute to being part of the sort of planning of the initiative or discussing or being part of just the group, you can I'll put my email address somewhere so that you can connect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And the author is Kathleen Cushman. And the full title is Fires in the Bathroom: Advice for Teachers from High School Students. So that's the book. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
And we will actually send a list of these books and resources to all the participants and also post it on our website, oabp.org. Sorry about that. if you're interested. So just want to let you know that. Okay, so I will move on to the next guest for question, Trishan Robinson. Just give me a second, I will enable you.
Hello.
Hi.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Yes. Peace,
Okay.
peace.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This has been awesome. Let me just start by saying that this is just so wonderful and informative and empowering. So, I just want to thank you all. And everybody has thanked you already, but I want to just add to that and thank you all again to all the wonderful speakers. So my question is, well, my statement, I guess. I'm about to graduate from my paralegal program at Centennial College next month. Yay! Thank you. And I was just wondering, I'm about to build my LinkedIn profile and, just really get into that professional aspect because I've never done anything like this before. And I just want to know, what would you guys say as a starting point? Like, where do I start? What do I do? Do I volunteer? How do I network? What would you guys say is the best place to start at?
Well, given that I teach in the paralegal program, I'll give you some insights, Trisha. And first of all, congratulations. I know how rigorous the program is. And so I'm really happy for you and best wishes to you. LinkedIn is actually a really great place to network. There's various, there's the OABP, like there's all sorts of organizations that are on LinkedIn that you can connect with. I would really encourage you at this point, we've been in our homes for 2 years, to get out there with a mask, but get out there and network when there are events that are coming up and get to know people, speak with people. When I talk to students about what mentorship looks like, I believe in active reciprocal mentorship. So, I have a lot of people who kind of approach me and say, I'd like you to be my mentor. And I'm like, I don't even know who you are, friend. So how about we get to know each other first? And then, maybe I'm not even the best person for you. Maybe I can refer you to somebody else who is interested in the things you're interested in or has more experience in the areas that you're interested in. And so really, I would suggest to you to really be focused on building relationships and getting to know people in a genuine way. And honestly, from there, that's where that sponsorship comes in. People will start thinking about Trishan when they now have opportunities or something's come up. That's how those things happen. I would also really encourage you in terms of if you're interested in a particular area of law, and you have the ability to be able to maybe sit in the courtroom, to observe, like just be a sponge on the wall to the best of your ability. But really at this point, reach out to people and don't be afraid to say, do you mind if you have capacity to hop on a Zoom? Maybe we can talk about your career and your journey and best practices. Like it's now about getting uncomfortable in order for you to be able to thrive.
The only thing, all of that is absolutely perfection. The only thing I would add is be excellent, because you could know 104 people, and if all of them say that you're lazy, it's not going to help you. So be excellent so that the people that you connect with will be wearing your shirt. And, when they're talking to people, and the first person that will come to mind, they'll say, Trishan, because she is serious. She's going to handle her business. That's what you want. I have no advice for LinkedIn because I use LinkedIn. I have a strategy. I'm trying to get a job with the Raptors, so I connect with anybody who works with MLSE, anyone. So just so you guys know, that's my LinkedIn strategy. If any of you work for the Raptors, hook me up. You know what I mean? Sorry, Marcus, you go ahead, man.
I don't have anything to add, but good luck.
Yes, and congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll add,
Yeah.
say this to all of my students, I say you're always on stage. I mean, from before you started the program, you were on stage, you're being scrutinized, even if you don't know it. And at this point, once you enter in, become one of my colleagues, you are representing paralegals. So there's no separating yourself now from, I'm just Trisha and I did this thing. No, you're a paralegal who did this thing. And so it's really important that you just recognize that you're on stage at all times, even when you're driving in your car. And so, just as Vidal said, in terms of that being excellent, recognize that even when you don't think people are watching, they are.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. That was great advice. And I took everything in. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. You're welcome.
Thank you, Trishan. I think we have another question from Elaine. Let me enable you again.
Thank you. Not a question. It's to Trisha. Trisha, call my office, Page Paralegal. I'd love to chat with you.
There we go. That's how
PH.
Elaine, do you work for the Raptors? Do you work for the Raptors? That's all I
No,
want to
but
know.
my doctor is the doctor for the Raptors. And
Well, there you go. There we go. 6 degrees of separation. Put in a word. You know what I mean?
You got it. So no, seriously, I would love to have a chat with you. I've been practicing for 30 years, and when you see my website, you'll know who I am.
Yeah,
love to have a chat with you. Okay.
Yeah.
I am literally Googling your website right now. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
Elaine is a trailblazer in the paralegal community. You're blessed to be able to make the connection.
Wow. Take a village.
Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions? Don't see anybody. Okay. I'll close it off then. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thank you to the panelists, Rochelle, Vidal, Marcus. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here and hearing all of your perspectives. Like I said before, I am totally blown away. Like, as you've noticed throughout your time, being almost speechless at points. I'm sad that I lost my partner, George, but I'm sure that he's with us in spirit. So, thanks again. Hopefully we'll see you in the future. Is there any closing comments that any of you would like to make before we close things off?
I don't know if somebody did just raise a hand.
Oh, thank you. Somebody's paying attention. Okay, so I will go to Lavinia. Oh, Lavinia, are you there?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Yes.
So my question is, one of the things that Dr. Chavannes had said, very first thing that you had mentioned is there's a lack of data. And because there's this lack of data, we are unable to decisively say, this is what it is. How do we go about getting that data so we can now educate ourselves in how to move forward?
Sure. So, all of the school boards should be collecting demographic data. That should be a policy that is enacted provincially, nationally. It should be already in existence. But I absolutely did say that we lack a lot of data. Yeah. However, I do want to say that we do know what's happening because we have been talking about it for 100 years. We know what's happening in education. People are hiding behind, we just don't have the numbers, right. and which is true. But we know what's happening, and we could have addressed it if there was, if people were being deliberate and intentional. However, so all the school boards should be collecting, and places like OCAS, where you apply for college, and OUAC, where you apply for university, they should be collecting demographic data. So all of the universities will have that data already. Like that is stuff that should be in place. We are miles behind, right. Certainly our neighbor to the south when it comes to the collection of demographic information. Yeah,
that's what I've seen. Okay, thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you. I went to school with Vidal.
Oh, Lavinia. I saw the name and I was like, it can't be the same one. How you doing? You
I'm
all right?
good. I'm good. So
Good.
it was one of the things that I know that having Black studies was an issue at our school, and I was happy to hear that you were actually a teacher and you had a hand in I guess developing a program. So thank you so much for that. It's unfortunate that I didn't get to be part of that, but this was very interesting. Thank you so much. It's opened my eyes. It's something new for me actually that I'm gonna dip in and move forward.
Amazing.
And I'll just say the collection of data can be done on a small scale as well. Like even in your own sphere of influence, you can collect demographic information for the people that you're responsible for and make some decisions when you can identify disproportionality and disparity. It's important. Numbers are fantastic if we use them properly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what Lavina brought up, the Black Studies piece. Like, it's a lot of students in secondary that's fighting for Black Studies to be implemented, and not just as an elective, but they feel like it's beneficial not just for Black students, but for all students, especially with non-Black students using the N-word like it just came out. So they need to learn, the historical context of that word and why that word is damaging, and they shouldn't be using it. Anybody should be using it for that matter. So I think Black Studies is something, because I know it's a Black Studies a Black Student Alliance at Forest Hill, which is a predominantly white Jewish school. They have a small Black population, and they're in the midst of fighting for, the last time I was there, they were in the midst of fighting for a Black Studies course there. So they're giving them all type of red tape. So I think wherever we have an opportunity to join into that fight to create that space and those courses are needed. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Lavinia also does not work for the Raptors. I just wanted to note that.
So,
Just in case.
so my cousin actually does though.
Oh, fair enough. You see what I'm talking about?
What is
You
happening?
have to say what you want. That
But
is a lesson. Trishan, I hope you're listening. You have to say what you want. See what I'm
Speaking
saying?
into existence.
We
You're
agree.
getting closer and closer there, sir.
That's what I'm talking about.
And funny that we're talking about this because he's actually the vice president of the organizational culture and inclusion. That's my cousin.
Oh, Wiggins?
That's my cousin.
I just met with him the other day. Hey, so hold on there. We're gonna talk. So sorry. I didn't mean to take us off track. April, please, back to you. Lavinia, we will be in touch. Definitely.
There's
Awesome. If anybody has any questions, please come forth. Okay, so we have Kinsey, where are you? Lost you. Kinsey? Okay. One more question from Kinsey Ahmed. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Peace.
Thank you so much for taking my call. I hesitated because as some of you might have children and you can't really predict when there is a war. I just thank you all for all the information and the experiences that you've all have shared. I feel like I've connected with each and every single one of you. Marcus pointed out something that I'm a mom and an advocate in my own right. I have 5 young children, and I've experienced a lot of barriers, a lot of issues. So I've spent most of my time being their advocate, but I'm really having a hard time, sort of, as Marcus highlighted, creating a space for other parents to join. For example, in the last 5 years of my kids' parent community council, I'm the only parent of color. Despite me trying to, wave and make connections, there's really not that, I guess, buy-in to be in these spaces. And I understand from experience that due to the position I have as a secretary in the school community council, I've been able to create a lot of change. And I'm just wondering, Marcus, how do you're very charming. How do you get other people to come on board with you? If you could share some experiences and tips, as was said earlier, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I like relationships. Like I build relationships. So when the guidance counselors or the principals were giving me students' name, I didn't want to just build relationships with the students. So when I got the students' information, I would call the parents and introduce myself to the parent first. It's like, hey, my name is Marcus Singleton. I'm the graduation coach for Black students. Your son or your daughter, I was just referred to them. I just want to let you know I'll be working with them. Like, what do you think your child needs? And then I would talk to the parent. And then soon as I got off the phone with the parent, I would call the student and then talk to them and compare the notes that I got from the parents and the students and have that, and then I would actually meet with the parent and the student via Zoom, for us to come up with a goal for them. So I would say building relationships is huge. Like try to, if you have to go over a parent's home and say, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I want somebody to partner with me. Are you willing to partner with me in this venture? Because I think parent coalitions are very important because based on my experience, some TDSB schools don't want parents to know what's going on in those spaces, and they need to know what's going on in those spaces. And in order to infiltrate those spaces, you can't do it by yourself. You have to have a coalition or members to go in there with you that'll have your back. You know what I'm saying? So I would say just try to build as many relationships as you can in within the school, because there are teachers there that want to get to know the students' parents. So I would say start with the teachers, try to build relationships there, and then try to start with other parents that you may know or may not know, and just try to build those relationships and then come together like Voltron. That's what I would say.
Kinsey, I would encourage you to join a group called Parents of Black Children. It's a nonprofit organization, and it's an Ontario-based organization that kind of gives advice to parents on how to navigate, the school system, the elementary school system specifically. And the other thing, as somebody who also was the only person of color at all on parent council for a number of years, I luckily have training in mediation, but I would say to frame some of the things that you're looking to do that would benefit Black students specifically from an interest-based framework. So how can you frame it in a way that everyone feels like they would benefit from this initiative, right? So, when you think about trying to meet other people's interests in addition to meeting your own needs, if you frame your asks in that way, you'll find quite a lot of success in terms of, because everyone wants to know what's in it for them. And unfortunately, if you just say it's for Black students to thrive, that won't be the deciding factor, unfortunately. And so so just, really think of things from that perspective. And the other thing is, I know that I would deliberately go and drop off my kids, even though the bus picks them up at their doorstep here in Niagara, well, rural Niagara, just so I could catch a glimpse of parents and do a, hey girl, hey, how are you? And trying to get together with parents just in and of itself. But I think Parents of Black Children might be able to give you some insights on how to do some of that engagement meaningfully.
Yeah, I think part of your question was about how you'd encourage other Black parents to participate as well. To be honest with you, some of the way that the system is designed keeps that from happening. For example, if the parents are divorced, there are some challenges around who can have access and participate. And then even when the parents are together, the meeting times are, inconvenient for a lot of people who have to work in order to make sure that they can pay their bills. I think, not that you don't, believe me when I tell you, I'm not saying that. I think that that the system needs to figure out a way to reach out to those parents as well. It would be nice if they were interested and could make the time, but the school needs to figure out how to do that as well. It's not solely your responsibility. I'll definitely say that. Mm-hmm. And what I do when I go to school and in the office, if there's any Black kids, I pretend I know their parents because I want the school to think that their parents are very involved in their kids' lives. So I see a kid in the office, like, I'm gonna talk to your mom. What happened? What happened? Just so they know people are looking out.
That's right. Yeah.
Every time.
Thank you so much for all your suggestions and feedback. I can't wait for tomorrow. I'll be like, hey.
Yeah, right? Hey. That's how it works. Amazing.
And I think Lavinia has another question.
He has an old hand.
No, I didn't know how to.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Don't be shy. No? Going once? Going twice? All right. So
yes. We were only booked till 7:30, man. What are you trying to do?
All right. So we will close it out now. And again, I'd just like to thank all of the panelists for giving up, your Wednesday evening to enlighten us with all of the knowledge and information that you have, and I'm sure that all of our guests can agree, and I know OABP is excited to have had you. That this has been a very informative and a very interesting conversation. Thank you again. Hope to see you soon, and maybe we'll have another conversation with with all of you again, hopefully very soon. So everybody have a good night. And as for those resources, they will be sent to all of the guests, and it will also be posted on the website oabp.org. Okay.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.